They're back! Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. Having already reviewed the original Poltergeist, I thought it only made sense to stop on by and review Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. Now, I mentioned in my review of Poltergeist that I'm pretty sure, well, I know for sure I taped these back in the late 80s off TV, but I can't remember. I have this recollection that it's possibly that they played them back to back. I guess it doesn't really matter regardless. When I was like 11 or 12 years old, I recorded the first two Poltergeists off TV, and this was at a time where I was getting into horror movies and stuff, so it was really fun to see these movies for the very first time. And at that, that age of 11 or 12 or whatever, they kind of creeped me out, obviously. Not that much, but they kind of creeped me out with, well, more so the first one, because this one's more or less kind of, as we'll get into, not completely wonderful. But obviously, the first film was a success. Obviously, most Steven Spielberg executive produced movies and or directed movies usually were back in the day. The 70s and the 80s were definitely his decades. And, obviously a movie does well, obviously someone out there wants to make some money and do another one. It's really interesting that apparently Steven Spielberg, or at least officially, had no interest in producing or having anything to do with a Poltergeist sequel, which is really interesting. I don't know if like I say, if I don't know, maybe he just sold the rights, got the hell, he had enough on his plate, sold the rights, let someone else do Poltergeist 2. So someone else, from what I know, I don't know much about these movies, but I've been pretty sure this has nothing to do with Steven Spielberg, just freaking someone else takes the reins, producerial, directorial. But what's really cool about, the sequel to Poltergeist is that, with the exception of the older daughter from the first film, and that makes sense because I don't know if this is supposed to be, I don't know how long after the first film this movie came out or takes place, but obviously, the older daughter is going to be off doing her own thing anyway, so the older daughter from the first film isn't in this, which is fine because she'd be moved out anyway. But what is really cool in retrospect about Poltergeist 2 is somehow they imagined, or they managed, I should say, to actually get with the exception of the older daughter from the first film, all the family members, the original dad, mom, son, and Carol Ann, of course. I mean, Heather O'Rourke is pretty much the face, obviously, of the what you want to call it, the trilogy, I guess, the Poltergeist films from the 80s. I mean, let's face it, even in the first film, she very quickly became the face of the first film. When you think of Poltergeist, you think of Heather O'Rourke at the end of the day. And very, very understandably so. I mean, maybe another face you might think of is also the whatever the hell her name is, the short woman with the glasses who, has got she says anything and you believe it kind of situation. But cut to however many years later, I don't think it's that long after the events of the first film, and I would imagine, that was 82. Maybe this came out in like 84, 85. I should have looked to see when that was, but whatever. I mean, the year is on the title of this video, so you already know what year this came out. But yeah, so basically the cut to whenever the hell this takes place, a couple years later or whatever, the family's living with the mom's mom. And I will say, the movie does a competent kind of a continuation of what would probably, this film's idea of the continuation of the story of the family. And it was interesting, the little dialogue they talk about, the trying to get, whatever, money from the insurance company, and the insurance company very, very realistically is saying, well, the house technically is not destroyed, it's missing. And you can totally see an insurance company even doing that. It's probably more real than one would like to imagine their response to the disappearing house from the end of the first film. As this, the Craig T. Nelson family is trying to get, funds for, and him having quit his lucrative job. I didn't mention his lucrative job. He was the kind of a huge, highfalutin salesman for all these houses. He was, selling, representative or whatever, salesman for these houses that they were building and selling in Cuesta Verde or whatever. I don't know. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Close enough probably for you to know what the hell I'm talking about. But yeah, he quit his job at the end of the film, so the family at the end of the first film, so the family coming into the second film is kind of worse for wear, and the dad's in kind of a bad shape. I think Craig T. Nelson maybe lost a little bit of weight between the first and second film, and so if that's the case, way to go, Craig T. Nelson. I know it's not always easy. I would imagine he was in his 30s when they did these films. Side note, but yeah, you know, it is cool to see the majority of the actual, you know, the cast members of the family from the first film back. And honestly, the older daughter wasn't a huge part of the first film, so it doesn't really matter if she's not around. One of the additions, obviously, or not obviously, but of course, to this film, which I'm not thrilled about, but you know, it's a really cool, because you know, it's cool to do something different for the sequel, obviously, and I want to say it's the guy from the Indian guy from One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think it's the same guy, but they once stuff starts, I can't even remember. You know what? Oh God, it wasn't even that long ago. I rewatched these films, and I can't even remember like some of the first things that started happening in this movie to that started going bad, but that's okay. I know the basics of this movie, and I know that there's something going on with a little toy phone, and I think instead of, oh, that's because they don't have a TV. Yeah, there's a funny line towards the beginning of the movie where they're listening to a baseball game on the radio, and the son's like, can't we get a TV? No. So obviously, I don't think there's a TV in mom's. Did I already say that? Yeah, I already said they're living with the mom's mother while they're trying to get the money for the disappeared house from the house insurance or the insurance company. But I can't even remember some of the first things that started to go wrong. But needless to say, things start to go wrong, and this you know, Native American, I don't know what I can even frickin' call him nowadays without having a treasure, or not a treasure trove, but yeah, anyway, we'll just simply call him a Native American guy. He's called in, and at first it's kind of like, okay, well, is it because the short woman with the glasses, they don't pay her enough to have her come back? Because when you're watching it, it's like, oh, this Indian guy is going to replace the one, you know, woman, know-it-all woman from the first film. Luckily, that doesn't end up happening. The woman ends up coming back, which is cool, and then she does show up like in the middle or whatever, and you're like, oh, is that it? But she does end up coming back again, so that's cool. But the one thing I will give to this movie to make it a little different from the first film, or a new addition to the second film that wasn't a part of the first film, is the, you know, the Native American guy, and the whole that whole aspect of this film, which is cool, and the things that he does to contribute to the mystery and stuff that of the film. So he you know, his addition to this, I guess, 3-film franchise from the 80s, and the second film is kind of a cool addition. But I got to tell you, the thing that I liked probably most, and probably still like most about this film, is simply the floating chainsaw that's, like, you know, floated. Too bad this movie wasn't in 3D. You know what? I wonder if they were thinking about it or whatever, because this was like the same year as a lot of those, the same era as, oh wait, no, it's a little later. The first film was the era of all the 3D movies. Anyway, the shot of the chainsaw flying through the air, like floating, poltergeisting, coming at the family in the car would have been perfect for 3D. But that's actually the one shot that even, you know, throughout the years, you know, because I never owned these on VHS. I did, you know, at some point in the 21st century get them on DVD. I got 2 and 3 on a DVD double feature thing, and the one thing that I remembered about, or one of the 2 things that I remembered about Poltergeist 2 was the floating chainsaw, and the whole kid with the braces and everything goes. It's kind of like the version of the tree attacking the kid from the first film, only he gets his attacking scene in this film is the braces running amok. But like I say, I can't exactly remember. It doesn't really matter some of the first, you know, paranormal things to start going on in the film. But needless to say, call in the Native American, and call in, is it Tangina? Something like that. The short woman, I think, with the glasses, who knows everything, I want to say is Tangina. But one thing, you know, admittedly, this movie, obviously, in the Poltergeist trilogy from the 80s, is a perfect example of you know, a trilogy or franchise just completely deteriorating, even over the course of just as many as 3 films. First one's, obviously the best. Second one, I'd say the only reason the second one's kind of any good is because you have, the majority of the family members, the cast, come back to reprise their roles. And, oh, I didn't mention Jerry Goldsmith is back as well. And those are the things that really help, make it feel like the first film, or at least as much as it possibly can. Poltergeist 2 definitely plays like definitely a money grab, and whereas like the first film had a lot of I didn't even mention it, but the first film for the time had a lot of very highfalutin, cutting edge at the time optical visual effects and stuff. And I don't know why it didn't even occur to me to mention in my review of the first film, but it had a lot of optical effects, probably ILM I would imagine, and stuff, and cutting edge visual effects for the time most likely. And one thing that you can definitely tell between the first film and this film is that they try to do as little opticals as possible, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing stuff for real, and that's actually a good thing. But when there are like optical effects, like towards the end, like with the the worm monster that grows into a monster and terrorizing them and stuff, I mean, the opticals, you can tell they're like on the screen for limited amounts of time because they're kind of crap or whatever. So I guess the things going for Poltergeist 2 are the majority of the cast back, the family, Jerry Goldsmith back, and a relatively competent continuation of the story. And what's revealed is, it's kind of cool because obviously they go and live with the mom's mother. And what's kind of cool is it's kind of revealed in this movie that the continuation of the story, or finding things out, is that Carol Ann was kind of clairvoyant or whatever in the first film. Maybe we didn't really address it. Maybe it wasn't really addressed at all. But what this film does is kind of does this family lineage of Carol Ann's grandma being like clairvoyant, and then maybe the mom is a little bit. It's kind of like Return of the Jedi, when you learn that maybe Leia has also got the Force or whatever. So in this film we find out that grandma's clairvoyant, mom might be clairvoyant, and that's why Carol Ann is clairvoyant or whatever. Not that we necessarily knew that in the first film, but that's why, so says the second film, why she was so sensitive to what was going on in the house and the TV and all this and that. So, and I guess we find out a little more about, the events of the first film and the situation going on under the house and the land. I try not to spoil everything in case some people watching the review of the first film never saw it, which I'm sure pretty much everyone has. But, one thing I don't like about this movie, and I guess it's another new addition, which, at least they tried to do something new or whatever, is the guy, the preacher guy, who, it's just like, I don't know, his scenes are, I mean, the guy, I mean, is well cast for the part, and his scenes are creepy and stuff, but it's just kind of like, just get past, it's like, the scenes don't interest me, and, they're done well, but they just don't interest me, all this stuff. But I guess because I'm not, I'm like anti-religious and anti, whatever it is, organized religion or whatever. But yeah, when the scenes with that guy come up, it's just like, give me a break. But what ends up, well, maybe I won't spoil, make it the review shorter. Maybe I won't spoil what ends up happening, or the more story is revealed with Poltergeist 2 and the antagonist being. And that's something that's kind of lame about this movie, is like the antagonist is given like this human form or whatever. In the first film, I thought it was much more effective when it was more, it wasn't given like a human form. It was a, spiritual, whatever, supernatural force, and it wasn't like, given this physical human form. So that, in my opinion, in Poltergeist 2, takes away from, I guess, the scare factor, even though the guy that they got to play this guy is creepy and looks like a living skeleton and stuff, and those scenes with him like at the front door are unsettling or whatever. It's just like, oh, give me a break. So I guess I won't spoil, just like with the first film, I won't spoil what is revealed about, it's a competent continuation of like details from the first film. We learn at the end of the first film why, there's such a high rate of paranormal activity going on, and I guess we I mean, it's kind of a half-ass thing, like adding on to something that didn't really need to be added on to, kind of a situation. But I mean, you're doing a money grab, you're doing a Poltergeist sequel. We got to have some new information. We can't just, you know, remake the first film, which they tried to basically do. But yeah, one thing that was kind of a bummer about this movie, it's like they have Jerry Goldsmith back, but there's like very little of the beautiful like Carol Ann theme from the first movie, which I thought was really weird. I almost want to say it's not even barely there until like the end credits, if it's there even then or whatever. But yeah, obviously. Oh, what's so funny is, you know, in closing, this film is billed, you know, Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, and I gotta say the climactic ending of this movie is really not that amazing, and it's very short. Like I say, it involves optical visual effects and stuff, and it's like either they didn't have enough budget to do them for very long, or they knew that they were crappy, so they didn't want to do it for too long. But I got to tell you, like the end finale when like Carol Ann briefly gets like kidnapped again, and only to like, it's like you think she's missing, and then like a couple seconds later she's back, and it's just like, I don't know, they just, yeah, the end of the movie feels like it was rushed, like, let's just do this in a day, and you know, we don't have enough money to do what we want to, so we'll just do this. And like the end battle with the, you know, because like I said, I tried to say this already a bit ago, but the title is Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, you know, I mean, The Other Side is like, yeah, I think it's kind of technically a part of the title. And the whole selling point of this movie is to like see the other side, because I don't think we saw the other side in the first film. So it was kind of like, ooh, you know, I can see, you know, kids and teenagers and 20-somethings like, oh, let's go see this because we actually get to see the other side. Well, yeah, well, the other side is basically like just the sky and clouds and dusk or dawn, and you know, the family members floating around, and you know, so it's kind of like if you're going into this movie, especially back when it came out, expecting to see like, you know, like, ooh, this will be cool, we actually get to see the other side. It's like completely a yawn fest, and there's nothing to see on the other side for the whole frickin' 1.5 to 2 minutes they spend on the other side. Is I can't even remember why they go to the other side. But also I could imagine the sales of, I wonder if this movie affected tequila sales, because yeah, the whole thing that happens like with the worm and everything, I would imagine would put a lot of people off to tequila. I don't drink, so I didn't have to, you know, it was never an issue with me. But feel free to let me know if, you know, if you're a drinker out there, and if you're a tequila fan, if seeing this movie affected your tequila drinking or not. I would imagine it very well might have. But my star rating for Poltergeist 2 would be, I guess it's competent enough to do the old 2 stars out of 4 stars. 2 stars for Poltergeist 2. 2 stars out of 4 stars for Poltergeist 2. It's got enough, you know, mainly for just having the majority of the cast back, Jerry Goldsmith back. You know, as I mentioned in my review of the first film, the strength, in my opinion, as looking at the first film as an adult, one of the biggest strengths of the movie is the casting and the characters and the music. I already mentioned that in the review of the first film. But so even if those characters and those cast don't have a whole hell of a lot of interesting stuff to do, it's still cool to see them back. There's always something about like seeing characters in a film and then seeing them come back. I can even remember going to see Attack of the Clones in the theater and even being like kind of delighted to see, oh, there's Jar Jar, you know, as much as you hate Jar Jar, it's like, oh, Jar Jar, you know, luckily he's barely in that movie, but it was almost like a, you know, there's something like familiarity with, even if you hate the character like Jar Jar, it's like, oh, that's cool to see Jar Jar back. But obviously these characters were, in my opinion, enjoyable in the first film, so it's even more fun to see them back, even if they don't have a whole hell of a lot to do. So yeah, I you know, having revisited it, I kind of just looked around, and I guess years ago Scream Factory, I think they put out 2 and 3 on Blu-ray, but I would imagine, well, I know this one for sure is out of print, probably 3 as well, but I have no interest in having 2 or 3 on Blu-ray. For me, you know, I should have more or less mentioned this in the review of the first one, but for me it's pretty much like the first one exists and nothing else. because I mean, even though 2 is like passable, it might as well not exist. You know, it's there to just rehash stuff that, you know, been done, and do new stuff that's kind of stupid and whatever. So I guess that'll be my review for Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. One thing that Jerry Goldsmith did is this really cool new little piece of music where it goes like dun 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 dun. And I think they even gave it some "God is in His holy temple." I did that last part bad, but it's like da 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 da. You know, Jerry Goldsmith did a lot of that kind of stuff, and I gotta tell you, Jerry Goldsmith is so fun. He does so many great scores and so much great music. But yeah, God is in His holy temple. Yeah, the last part there I can't do correctly, but anyway, I guess that'll pretty much do it for my review of Poltergeist 2. I definitely never need this on Blu-ray. The Poltergeist 2 and 3 double feature DVD is definitely good enough for me. Feel free to, obviously I'll be continuing on to do my review of Poltergeist 3, which will be uploaded next at some later date or whatever, so be on the lookout for that. If it's already up, feel free to check out that video. I can't imagine that review is going to be very long. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video. Okay.